Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and I'll hand over to you, Vicky, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining. Today we've been invited in by Open Awards to get inspired to work with dogs. I can get the PowerPoint to move on, which would be helpful. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I've pressed it too many times. Don't ruin the surprise. Don't ruin so what I want to do first of all then is explain a little bit about who I am and who Animal Focus is, and why we in particular are here today to talk to you about the huge range of fantastic jobs that are out there working with dogs. So Animal Focus is a relatively new business. We've been up and running pretty much a year exactly now, and we do two main things. Firstly, we support pet professionals with their education and training requirements. And we'll talk about what kind of people those pet professionals are as we go through. But also we offer canine assisted therapy interventions in schools. So this is the first picture then is me. I'm Vicky Skinner, and the original therapy dog, Hero. She is an Italian Spinoni, and she is the most chilled out dog on the planet. She was absolutely designed to be a therapy dog. She loves nothing more than a cuddle, a story, and sitting there snuggled up listening to what's going on. So her and I were the original team. And then in January this year, we had a slightly sudden addition of the little black puppy. This is Waffle. She came to us in January having been rescued, not from a particularly traumatic situation. She was an unwanted Christmas present who was going to be put to sleep if she didn't find a new home very quickly. So being the soft touch that we are, we took on Waffle, who is the polar opposite from Hero. Hero is very chilled out. Waffle is very high energy. Waffle loves to chase Hero around, hang off Hero's ears, jump up at people. She will be a therapy dog as she gets a little bit older and hopefully a little bit more sensible. But at the moment, she is very much a therapy dog in training. And then just last month, 2 months ago, we were joined by our newest team members, Michelle Roberts and her new Patterdale, Luna. So Michelle does a very similar job to me. She helps the pet professionals with training, with course development, with quality assurance, and hopefully in the next couple of months, she'll start out doing some canine assisted therapy as well. So how did I get to this point? What are some of the jobs that I personally have done? So I started off at university. As I was just discussing a few moments ago, I went to De Montfort University in Lincoln, and I did animal science with behaviour. And then I moved from there into dog training, and I worked back in Scotland as a dog trainer for a couple of years. And then I moved down to England, where I did a completely different job, and I taught. So I taught animal care at a college in Northamptonshire. So the first picture, which is not Hero, this is our other Italian Spinoni, our previous Italian Spinoni, being taught by the students how to complete an agility course. So I taught for 13 years, and then I stopped to have babies, which is why there is a small child in the picture. And during that time, we lost our first dog, Cadbury. So we got a flat-coated retriever called Whisper. And Whisper and Phoebe grew up together. I then went back to work, and I went into staying in education. I worked for a trade association, which is an organisation that supports pet businesses through all sorts of things, through providing insurance, providing advice, but also providing education and training. And one of the big pluses of working there was that we got to go to crafts. So every year we had a stand at crafts. We had Hero by this point. So Hero came along, sat on our stand at crafts, drew in the crowds. We were able to talk to them then about the things that we did at the trade association. And then most recently, which is our therapy dog work, again back with Hero, we go into schools, we go into care homes, we go into clients' homes on one-to-one, and we offer a range of therapies and activities to allow people of all ages and with all abilities and disabilities just a way of connecting, relaxing, building confidence, etc. So that's kind of me and why I'm here today, and what I've done and some of the jobs that I've done. But while I've done lots of jobs with dogs, there are lots and lots more. So what I thought we'd do is we'd play a little game. I'm going to give you some clues, and I want you to see if you can work out from the clues what job I'm describing. I'd like you to put it in the chat or shout out, I don't mind, whatever's easiest for you guys. We're going to see if we can work out what jobs I'm discussing. So, clue number 1. I work with one dog at a time. Any idea what type of jobs work with one dog at a time? I've got Terry primed to give me some answers if nobody else does.
Oh, I think Robin's coming in. Oh,
Oh,
Robin said dog groomer.
Dog groomer. Okay, it could be a dog groomer. Let's see if we still think dog groomer after our next clue. Thanks, Robin. Very much appreciated. Okay, I use lots of treats and rewards. Police dog training, yeah, could be. That would make sense. One dog at a time. Lots of treats and rewards. Any other ideas?
We've got behaviourist and search dogs.
Okay, so let's see if we're all still thinking the same thing after our next clue. I know about the science behind how animals learn. So, are we sticking with the same answers, or is there anything we want to add? Behaviourists coming back up. Okay, final clue, and then we'll find out the answer. The dogs that I work with go on to help other people. So some of the suggestions we had there would still make sense. Anything else we want to add? Any other ideas that we've had? Assistance dogs. It's all very quiet at the college. I don't know if they're shouting out going on in the background or not.
They have said guide dog trainer. That was one of their choices earlier.
Yeah. So we've had a good range of answers. So I'm hoping, oh, one final clue, I forgot about this one. This should be the final clue that really pushes us in the right direction. Dogs I work with can alert you to a smoke alarm. So we've managed to narrow it down. What kind of job do we think we are now? Guide dogs?
Yeah, I would say that.
Oh, not quite guide dog. So this particular job is a hearing dog trainer. So this particular dog trainer will train dogs to assist people who have hearing impairments and are deaf, rather than people who have visual impairments and are blind. The training is all done in a very similar way. They tend to use lots of positive reinforcement, building up on the relationship, and very much using that science behind how dogs learn to build and shape really quite complex behaviours for the dogs. Now, hearing dog trainers have a little bit more flexibility in the dogs that they work with than guide dogs. Sometimes it's your own pet that hearing dogs will take, and they will train to respond to all the different sounds and give different signals for each of the sounds they see, whereas guide dogs tend to have their own breeding programs and use very specific breeds of dogs, things like Labradors. They have used a couple of Italian Spinonis. Labradoodles are quite common now. And the reason that they're much more particular about the types of dogs that they work with and that they train is because the dogs have to be physically big enough to lead a person. If you had a tiny little Chihuahua or Pomeranian, the person's going to have to bend down significantly. So they need something that is big enough to lead a person without tripping them over, strong enough to take them in the direction they need to go at. Also, not something that's particularly high maintenance. They want something that doesn't need a lot of grooming, because that's not particularly easy for somebody who's got visual impairment to do. Whereas the hearing dog trainers can work with any dog, because what they're training the dog to do is to give a different signal depending on what sound they've heard. So as you can see in the picture, the dog's put 2 paws on the person's knee, and then the handler has then given the signal, which is show me, and the dog will then take them to the source of the sound. However, if it was something like a smoke alarm, where there really isn't time for the person to take them to the problem, or for there to be a delay, the dog will have a very different signal, which tends to be sort of a jumping up and a real sort of padding at the person, sort of a real urgency, where they're moving against the person, because that one sound means your life might be in danger and you need to get out. Whereas if it's the doorbell, or it's the phone for a text message, or any of those sort of lower level and less important sounds, the dog has time to take the person to the source of the sound. Whereas the smoke alarm is really, you need to get out of here now. So some of the suggestions that we had in the chat as we talked about and we gave the clues were of different types of trainers. So we talked about guide dog, hearing dog, search and rescue. Can we think of any other types of dog trainer?
Like show dog training as well. I know that's maybe a bit off topic, but that it, like for crufts and things like that.
Yeah, so they tend not to be jobs in the same way, because quite often people are, it's their hobby, it's their pet dog.
Yeah.
You tend, unless you're winning crufts, you're probably not going to make enough money to live and for that to be your actual job. But there is absolutely training of pet dogs rather than necessarily for a particular show like that. So we just had, I saw the next one, just like that, I saw somebody put in assistance dogs. Now, we need to be clear at this point that there is a difference between assistance dogs and therapy dogs. So assistance dogs all get their own special coloured harness, like you can see in this picture. And they are the dogs that get to use this little hand logo. Oh, no, don't go further, I'll give you the answers. Get to use this little hand symbol. And those are the dogs that have legal rights as support dogs to go into any shop, any restaurant, buses, taxis, all of those sorts of things to help the person that they're working with. Whereas therapy dogs don't have that same legal right. They are not reviewed in the same level of assistance because they're providing therapy. They're not physically helping that person go about their day-to-day tasks. So assistance dogs have more rights, and assistance dogs get their own special codes. Now, there are lots of charities now that train assistance dogs for various purposes. So we've talked about hearing dogs, and we've talked about guide dogs, which have the yellow coat. You might have also seen Dogs for Good and support dogs who do tasks for people who tend to have quite physical disabilities. So people who are in wheelchairs or have sort of physical deformities that mean they can't use their hands or their legs in the same way. So those dogs are trained to do particular jobs. So it might be opening doors, opening the fridge, taking things out of the washing machine, collecting particular objects on command. So picking up a dropped mobile phone or a dropped set of keys. So those dogs are trained in exactly the same way as the hearing dogs and the guide dogs. Lots of positive reinforcement, lots of short training sessions, building up very simple behaviours such as sniff this, to rewarding and rewarding and rewarding and shaping that behaviour to the point that not only are they sniffing it, but they're picking it up and then bringing it to you. So they're able to build up really quite complicated behaviours. One of the other dogs that are in this group of assistance dogs are medical detection dogs. Now, medical detection dogs are a group of dogs that do two different functions. They have medical detection dogs that are paired with individual owners, handlers, And those medical detection dogs are trained to detect and alert the handler if they're about to suffer from an episode of a particular illness. So sometimes it's diabetes, if their blood sugar drops, epilepsy and seizure detection is another really common one. So because dogs have super sensitive noses, might be slightly more complicated than just noses, but we'll go with that. They're able to detect changes in the smell of the person or the electrical energy around that person just before they have an incident, a seizure. And they let the person know, and that person can get into a safe space. There are lots and lots of videos about the way medical detection dogs work and how they alert people. Excuse me. So some medical detection dogs work with individual people. Other medical detection dogs are used more in a testing sort of situation where they can smell various samples and they can detect things like cancer, like COVID. There was a new one they were doing quite recently. What was that? Anyway, so they're able to smell tissue samples and they're able to identify the ones that have disease within them. So they tend to work in the medical detection head offices or in labs, sometimes in hospitals. And what they're finding is that actually these medical detection dogs are more accurate than some medical tests at detecting some types of cancers. Depends on the type of cancer, it depends on the location of cancer. But I think bladder cancer in particular has been really successful for medical detection dogs to identify. So that was one of our types of dog trainers. The other type we talked briefly about when we talked about pet dog training, and somebody mentioned in the chat about behaviourists. So behaviourists tend to work with people who have dogs that they're struggling with. So it might be that the dog's aggressive, it might be that the dog is really fearful, so scared of fireworks, scared of traffic, scared of men, scared of loud noises, aggressive towards other dogs, really protective over their food bowl, sometimes just really high energy. And these behaviourists will meet with the dog and the handler and they'll talk through all their problems and they will put together a plan for how they can help that owner overcome this problem. One of the key, I guess, differences between the trainer and the behaviourist is the trainer tends to be providing hints and tips on how to get the dog to do things that come fairly naturally to it and things that we want to see more of. Whereas the behaviourist tends to be working with the handler to help the owner overcome a problem and try and remove a problem that the dog has rather than trying to develop new behaviours. The biggest difficulty that pet dog trainers and behaviourists have is that they're not really working with dogs, they're working with people. And sometimes making the person understand or giving the instructions in a way that allows the person to follow them or be consistent with them is really difficult. So what you find if you're working as a pet dog trainer or behaviourist, that your people skills have to be just as good as your animal skills, because you have to be able to communicate clearly, give clear instructions, not give too much information in order to make sure that that dog does get the training that it requires. Because as a behaviourist, you're giving the advice and then you're leaving, and it's going to be up to the owner to work with that dog to improve the problem. So your communication skills and quite often your written skills, because you have to leave sort of instructions and reports and notes so that the person can follow it, are just as important as it is for your dog skills in that situation. Okay, and another one that we had in the chat was search and rescue trainers. So I've linked all of these together as police dog handler. It might not fully be police, it might be in an airport or security, but search and rescue dogs. And what we know is that the police don't just use one type of dog and they don't just train them for one particular activity. So if you look at the picture there, we've got two quite different kinds of dogs. We've got our German/Belgian Shepherd, it could be either, which is used in a slightly more scary way than some of the other dogs are. So they're the dogs who are sent after you if you've done something a little bit naughty and you're running from the police. They're the dogs who will grab hold of your arm if you're running and pull you to the ground. They're the dogs that will, you know, when the police break down your door, are the ones that come hurtling up the stairs. The other dog, the nice little spaniel, which despite showing its teeth still looks very friendly, will be used much more for its nose. So it's trained by the police to detect one or more of the substances that are listed there. So they might be trained to detect drugs, might be trained to detect money. And by money, I don't mean you've got 50 pence in your pocket. It's stashes of illegal money, so wads of notes rather than loose change. They might be trained to detect explosives, which is what you quite often see at airports, and also what you quite often see if there's big events, they'll send the sniffer dog round, like stadiums and arenas, to check for any sorts of explosives. They might be trained to detect for guns, or unfortunately also human remains. And the human remains detection dogs sometimes are used for people searching, but more often than not are used after road traffic accidents where they're looking for bits of bodies rather than whole bodies. So as a police dog trainer and handler, you're paired with one dog and you're responsible for some of the training, also then the care of that dog and the working of that dog. So you will live with the dog is effectively your working pet, and you get to take that dog home. But as part of that deal, you're then responsible for the care and welfare of it. So I think that pretty much covers our training and learning type jobs, and we've seen there's lots and lots of those jobs. So let's move on to round 2. So this time I help dogs. What do we think it could be? My chat.
Ah, yeah. So we've got veterinary nurse and behaviourist as an option.
Yeah. So our next clue, I need specialist equipment. So it could still be our vet nurse. I think that's still a fairly fair guess.
Yeah.
Behaviourist, maybe less so.
We've got a dog rescue centre or a vet again.
Yeah. I know about the biology of dogs. So there's still some science involved in this job, but not necessarily the science of learning, but more about the biology. So again, I think veterinary nurse sounds like a fairly good option.
Yep, I think that's the way it's going.
Let's see what this one says. I can prescribe exercise, but not medicine.
So Colin's just said nutritionist, and then Kaylee's put vet physiotherapist.
Oh, okay. So we've got a couple of different ideas this time. So there's more jobs with dogs coming out.
Yeah, we're going down physiotherapy route now. That's right. Oh, hydrotherapy. We've got hydrotherapy there.
So this last one will hopefully push you in the right direction again. I wear a wetsuit.
Oh.
So hopefully that means we've narrowed it right down to a canine hydrotherapist.
Well done, Sue.
Yeah, that's it. Brownie points there. So canine hydrotherapists work with dogs who might have medical conditions, quite often arthritis, or they've had an operation on their back or their legs and they're needing to build up some muscle and some strength again. Or it might be that they are overweight, and hydrotherapy is a nice way for them to burn off some calories, lose some weight without putting too much pressure on their joints. So this was me and my first dog, Cadbury. When I was not a hydrotherapist, I didn't miss that out. This was part of the teaching. We had some hydrotherapy students and we were doing some teaching with them. So there's a number of different ways that you can do hydrotherapy. You can do it in a pool like this, but now there are also canine treadmills. So you stay nice and dry and you pop the dog inside what is a treadmill inside a tank, pop the dog on the treadmill, close the tank up, and then the tank fills with water and the dog can then carry out its swimming or just walking through water, depending on the volume of water in there. So what other healthcare jobs are there? We've looked at all the training type jobs. Now we need to have a think about the healthcare type jobs. And these are ones that you maybe think of a little bit more when you think, I want to work with dogs. You can be a vet, you can be a vet nurse, or you can be a veterinary care assistant. So they're all the different levels within a veterinary practice. Veterinary care assistant might be responsible for looking after animals that are in overnight, might be responsible for the sort of cleaning of the salon, getting things ready, welcoming clients as they come in. Veterinary nurse might assist in some of the surgeries. They might run their own clinics for vaccinations, for puppies, for weight, and they might also deliver a little bit of sort of physiotherapy for dogs that have come in as well. Physiotherapists, somebody mentioned in the chat earlier. So they are people who effectively, again, prescribe exercise. So dogs which have had problems with parts of their body, have had operations, and have a weakness somewhere, are given a range of exercises. And I don't mean exercises as in you're going to run for 20 minutes and then do weights for 10, but it might be that they're given particular poles that they have to walk over or walk around. It might be they're given particular exercises to stretch muscles, to build muscles, to increase their flexibility. And they might work in a vet, or they might be referred from a vet and go out to the client's own house to provide their services. Dog groomers, so they offer bathing, drying and styling of dogs. Usually dogs that are a little bit hairier. You tend not to see too many Labradors in at the dog groomers. And they can either work for themselves and set up their own grooming salon in their house, in their shed, in a van, or they might work as an employee for a larger organisation. So some pet shops employ dog groomers, some vets employ dog groomers, and they are responsible for maintaining the coat condition of the dogs that come into them. And we also had right at the start of this section of questions, somebody suggested that they might work in rescue kennels. So what we see is that there are a range of animal care and dog care charities. I've named the RSPCA as one because they're probably the biggest one in the UK, but there are lots and lots and lots of smaller charities, local charities who do just as good work. And if you're working for the RSPCA or a similar charity, there are a number of jobs that you can do with them. So you could be an RSPCA officer or inspector, and you could get to go out to houses, farms, markets, and carry out inspections and make the decision about whether or not that dog is healthy and that dog is suffering. And if it is suffering or not living in the best of conditions, you can provide advice and recommendations for the owner, or in the worst case scenario, you can arrange for that animal to be taken into care of the charity. And once it's in the care of the charity, then there's a whole bunch of other jobs. So you can be a kennel worker in a rescue centre where you're providing the care for these dogs, and quite often it's care that is literally keeping the dogs alive. In some situations, you're giving them the right food, the water, you're removing parasites that they've had, you're making sure they've got the right medical treatment. You are effectively saving their lives. And then you'll continue to care for that dog as it gets better, as it gets healthy, as it gets more able. And then the next job that you may have there is that you may be responsible for finding new owners for that dog. And you may be part of the team who meet with new owners, discuss their requirements, potentially do home checks, and follow up on whether or not that person is suitable to have that dog. So even within a charity, a rescue charity, there's lots and lots of jobs there that involve working with dogs. Okay, final round. So this time I look after lots of dogs. Any ideas? Dog walker, a fair guess. Kennel assistant, yeah. Dog rehoming charity.
Or a breeder.
Breeder, yeah, I think that's also fair. So let's have a look at our next clue. The dogs get to walk and play together. I think again, potentially some of those things would still work. I think a dog walker is still a fair guess. Kennel supervisor, yeah. Dog daycare, yeah, definitely a good one. Okay, I have to have a license. So what we know is that some businesses that work with dogs under a particular piece of legislation have to have a license that's issued by their local council. And those types of organisations are dog breeders, which we've mentioned, dog kennels, which we've mentioned, dog daycare, which we've mentioned, and home boarding. So all of those businesses need to have a license. And you should know that they have a license because that license needs to be displayed, that license number needs to be displayed on all of their marketing materials. So on their website, on their business card, on their Facebook page, all of those sorts of things should have that license number on it. Holiday kennels, yeah. I have to understand how dogs communicate and behave. So we've had jobs where they need to know about how they learn and the science behind how the brain works. And we've had jobs that they need to know about the biology and what's going on inside the dog. And this time they need to know how dogs communicate and behave. Okay, this time, dogs do not stay with me overnight. So what are we putting our money on? Which one of those do we think it's going to be? Yes, excellent, well done. So this time I am a dog daycare assistant. So dog daycare is quite a new type of job in animal care, as is dog walker, to be fair, and pet sitter. Dog daycare can vary greatly. So the one that you can see in this picture is an outside space with some sort of shelter and things. Some of them are entirely inside. So we've seen daycares that are in shopping centres and warehouses and industrial units. And they just have a big area with sort of a sand pit at one end that they can use as a toilet, some sofas that they can have a rest on, and various bits of enrichment activity and objects throughout it. Some daycares are just in fields, and we also know of plenty that are a large field with a paddling pool and a sand pit and a shed for them to lay down in when they're quiet. We know of daycares that are licensed to take 5 dogs. We also know of daycares that are licensed to take 80 dogs. So working in a dog daycare varies depending on what that daycare setup is actually like. But the key requirements of the job are for you to supervise what those dogs are doing. So the ratio of staff for daycare is 1 to 8. So for every 8 dogs, there should be 1 member of staff. and it's their responsibility to oversee those dogs, to make sure that while there's lots going on, there's not one dog hiding in the corner scared, there's not one dog grabbing hold of every toy that the other dogs want to play with and not letting anybody else do anything. It's their job to make sure that the dogs coming into the daycare are all healthy, that none of them have got fleas or kennel cough or ringworm or any of those diseases that would be problematic for the other dogs because they're contagious. So there's an element of health checking, but the most important thing they're doing is making sure that the dogs are interacting in a safe way. So we've touched on a number of other dog care jobs. I think we've talked about most of those as we've gone through. Dog walker is something that lots and lots of people do as a bit of a hobby or as a sort of an easy way of making a bit of extra money, quite often in the sort of school holidays, after college, things like that. Dog walkers are not licensed. Anybody can be a dog walker. However, they should be insured. If they're not insured, then they're putting themselves and the owner's dogs at risk, because if something happens, they've no way of resolving the situation. So they should absolutely be insured, and that insurance will also tell them how many dogs they can walk at the same time, so that you shouldn't see dog walkers turning up with 15 dogs that they're letting out the back of their car at the same time. Home boarders, sort of similar to daycare in that it's the dogs come and stay with them and they observe their behaviour, but home boarders run it from their own house. So they do require a licence, and that licence will tell them how many dogs they're allowed to have at any one time, depending on the number of rooms within the house. And you keep those dogs in your house and you treat them like your own dogs. You can take them out for walks, and you can, leave them while you pop to the shop. And then the owners, when they come back on holidays, will come and collect them from your home. Which is slightly different from kennel workers, where the dogs are in a kennel. They're not allowed to mix with other dogs when they're in the kennels, and they're unlikely to be walked off-site. Pet sitter is very similar to a home boarder, but you go into the person's house. So rather than you caring for somebody else's dog in your own home, you go and visit the dog in their own house. So it might be that you just pop in and let it out for play and a wee and feed it, or it might be that actually you stay there overnight and keep that dog company. And another new type of job that we're seeing increasingly is people who offer pet taxis. So in particular in places like London, in big cities where not everybody has a car, or where there are elderly or disabled pet owners, the pet taxi will come, pick the dog up, take the dog to the venues, whether it be the groomers, the vets, the daycare potentially, leave the dog there and then come back with the dog later on in the day. So they are some of the dog care professional jobs. And we've talked about a lot now. We've talked about jobs that involve training dogs. We've talked about oh my goodness, they've talked about dogs that involve providing health and making sure the welfare of the dogs are good. And we've talked about these pet care professionals, pet service providers, who offer their services to help make it easier for you to look after your own dog. And it sounds like that's loads, but actually there are still lots and lots more. One of the most up and coming ways of making a living is to be an influencer. And there are a number of dog influencers out there where they've made themselves famous with the help of their very cute and photogenic dog. But there are other more traditional jobs that we haven't talked about. So things like sheepdog handlers, also known as farmers, but that didn't really sound like it was working with dogs. Dog sled guides, dog photographers, nutritionists, somebody mentioned before. Dog wedding chaperones, we've got a couple of those I'm aware of, who their job is to bring your dog to your wedding and then be the dog's nanny throughout the wedding, and then take the dog home at the end of the day. We haven't also touched on any of the hundreds of companies that make products for dogs. So we're talking about everything from dog food, dog treats, through to dog leads, dog harnesses, dog toys. There are lots and lots of micro businesses out there where people are making something niche, something cute, something that people want for their dog without having to necessarily be a large manufacturer. However, large manufacturers do also take on employees, and that's not just in factories, but also to work as nutritionists, to work as advertisers, marketers. And all of those people have to have some knowledge of the dogs and the dog's nutrient requirements in order to do their job properly. Lab technician is there, and I know lots of people like to not think about the fact that we have dogs in labs and what potentially happens to them there. But there are a number of labs in the United Kingdom that do have animals of various species. And actually, as an animal technician, your job is to provide those animals with the best standard of life that they can have in that situation. So they're not going to live lives like your average pet dog, but that doesn't mean that they can't still live good lives, and you can't be responsible for providing them with the best care. We haven't talked about the army and the number of roles that the army use for their dogs. We briefly mentioned breeders. Security dog handlers are pretty similar to the sort of the police and army dog. Greyhound trainers, so we haven't mentioned them at all. And there's certainly plenty of people out there work with greyhounds. Sometimes in the charity side after the greyhounds have done their job, unfortunately. Research. Now this is one that, and I don't mean research in a lab way, I mean research into what food is best for dogs, how dogs communicate particular experiences, whether or not dogs are left or right pod, how particular medicines work within the dog. So there's lots and lots of jobs / funding available for those people at universities who are working on providing further information and greater depth of knowledge about dogs and dog care. Kennel club officers who oversee a lot of the dog shows. We spoke very before you guys joined. We spoke about dog shows, and actually, while you wouldn't necessarily have a job as a trainer at a show, you could have a job that is where you organise and oversee all of these dog shows, agility competitions, all those sorts of things. Licensing inspector. We've spoken about the fact that some dog businesses need to be licensed, and somebody has to do that licensing. So in an ideal world, the licensing officer will understand dog welfare, they'll understand the behaviour of the dogs, so that when they go into a premises, they're able to make informed decisions. So I think, while that is not an exhaustive list, and there are still other jobs out there, that is a pretty whistle-stop tour of the range of jobs that are out there in relation to dog care. So we will ask if anybody's got any questions.
Can't see anything in the chat yet, but I just want to say like how amazing that was and how many different jobs are out there and what the amazing stuff assistance dogs can do as well. Like there was a lot there that I didn't even realise was how complex it was in that sense, like in terms of how much they support individuals when it is assistance dogs with like medical support and everything like that. So yeah, it was really, really interesting. I feel like I've heard a lot more. I'm also interested to find out if dogs are left pawed or right pawed. So
it depends on the dog is the official answer. Is the official answer for that one.
We've had one question, but it is related to open awards. It says, are open awards looking at developing dog related units or quals? I'm not aware that that is something in the pipeline at the moment, but that could change at any point really. But it's not something that's in the development right now. But yeah, we'll see what the future brings. Okay. Oh, Vicky, one for you. Where are you based?
I am based, despite the accent, I am based in Northamptonshire. Which I guess is kind of where my final little plug, I guess, is. So Animal Focus is a new business, and we've got a range of potential ways forward over the next couple of months. One of which is to look to offer dog bite prevention workshops and assemblies to schools, to brownies and cubs and scouts and all those sorts of things. And the other one, which is coming very soon, the next couple of weeks, is going to be an online course for those schools who have a therapy dog on site to make sure that they're doing the right thing in the right way. So it'll cover a little bit of risk assessment, legislation, dog behaviour, the types of things you can do with the therapy dog in class. So those are my two sort of plugs. Should anybody want to find out any more, please don't hesitate to contact me or find us on social media. And you can find out much more about what Hero, Waffle and Luna get up to, because that's what mostly our social media channels are all about.
Oh, amazing. That's great. Thank you so much for that. I'll just stop the recording now.